The burning silence, the distress signal never came. That was the first thing that made Admiral Sarah Chen's blood run cold. Horizon Prime, a flourishing human colony of 8 million souls, had simply stopped talking. No emergency broadcasts, no final messages, just the empty hiss of dead communication channels stretching across the void. Sarah stood in the command center of Earth's Unified Defense Headquarters, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display floating before her. The star map showed Horizon Prime's location in the outer territories, a blue dot that should have been pulsing with activity. Instead, it sat dormant, lifeless. "How long since last contact?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing dread in her chest. 48 hours, Admiral," replied Lieutenant James Morrison, his fingers dancing across his console. "We've sent 3 automated probes. 2 made it through." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Show me." The hologram shifted and the command center fell into absolute silence. The footage from the probes played in crisp, horrifying detail. Horizon Prime hung in space like a dead eye, its once green continents now black and gray. The oceans had evaporated, leaving behind cracked salt flats that stretched to the horizon. Cities that had housed millions were nothing but smooth glass melted and reformed by unimaginable heat. But it was the message that made Sarah's hands curl into fists. Carved across an entire continent, visible even from orbit. Words had been burned into the planet's crust with plasma weapons. The letters stretched for hundreds of kilometers, glowing faintly with residual heat. "The Krell sovereignty has cleansed this world of human contamination." "Survivors?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "None, Admiral. Atmospheric analysis shows the entire surface was subjected to sustained orbital bombardment. Nothing could have survived. They didn't just attack the colony, they sterilized it." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, seeing in her mind the families she'd never meet, the children who'd never grow up, the dreams that had died in fire. Horizon Prime had been more than a colony. It had been hope, a place where humans from a dozen different nations and backgrounds had come together to build something new. Now it was a tomb. "Do we have confirmation on the attackers?" she asked, opening her eyes. "Yes, Admiral. Sensor logs from the orbital defense platforms before they were destroyed show Krell Sovereignty fleet signatures. 4 battlecruisers, 12 destroyers, and at least 20 support vessels. They jumped in from dark space, bypassed our early warning systems, and completed their attack in under 6 hours." Sarah turned to face the assembled officers in the command center. These were men and women who had served through border skirmishes, piracy raids, and diplomatic incidents. But none of them had seen anything like this. War had been theoretical for so long. Humanity had spent 2 centuries building, exploring, and establishing peaceful relations with dozens of alien species. The Krell sovereignty had been one of their neighbors, a militaristic empire that had always been cold but never openly hostile. They traded, maintained diplomatic channels, and respected boundaries. Until now. "Get me the Secretary General," Sarah said quietly. "And prepare Protocol Omega." Morrison looked up sharply. "Admiral, Protocol Omega hasn't been activated since the Unification Wars, are you certain?" Sarah's gaze returned to the image of Horizon Prime, to those burning words carved into a dead world. "They murdered 8 million people, Lieutenant. They didn't target military installations. They didn't demand surrender. They simply erased an entire world because they could. Yes, I'm certain." Within the hour, Sarah stood before the Emergency Council of Earth. The holographic images of world leaders filled the circular chamber, their faces grim as they reviewed the evidence. Secretary General Marcus Okonkwo, a man who had built his career on peaceful expansion and diplomatic solutions, looked like he'd aged a decade in a single day. "The Krell have issued a statement," Okonkwo said, his voice heavy. "They claim Horizon Prime was illegally established in disputed territory. They say this was a lawful action to protect their borders." "That's a lie," Sarah said flatly. "Horizon Prime was established 40 years ago with full Galactic Council approval. The Krell never disputed the claim. This wasn't about territory. This was a message. They wanted to prove that humans are weak, that we can be attacked without consequence." A European delegate leaned forward. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" Sarah took a breath. She'd rehearsed this moment in her mind during the journey to Earth, but saying it aloud made it real. "Total war. We activate every reserve fleet, every mothballed vessel, every ship that can carry a weapon. We mobilize the entire human military apparatus and we show the Krell sovereignty exactly what happens when you massacre our people." The chamber erupted in voices. Some called for restraint, for sanctions, for Galactic Council intervention. Others demanded immediate action. Sarah waited, letting them argue, until Secretary General Okonkwo raised his hand for silence. "Admiral Chen," he said softly, "if we do this, we change everything. Humanity has built its reputation on being reasonable, on solving conflicts through diplomacy. The galaxy will see us as aggressors. The galaxy will see us as survivors," Sarah countered. "Right now, every species is watching to see what we do. If we respond with strongly worded letters and economic sanctions, they'll know humans are easy targets. But if we respond with overwhelming force, if we make the Krell regret they ever heard the word human, then no one will dare threaten us again." Okonkwo studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Protocol Omega is authorized. Admiral Chen, you have full command of all human military assets. May God have mercy on us all." Sarah saluted. "God may offer mercy, Secretary General. We won't." The mobilization began immediately. Across human space, spanning 50 star systems and hundreds of worlds, the call went out. Every military base activated. Every shipyard roared to life. Every soldier, sailor, and pilot reported for duty. On Mars, the ancient orbital shipyards that had built humanity's first-generation ships began producing warships again. Massive construction frames that hadn't moved in decades started assembling destroyers, cruisers, and carriers at a pace that defied belief. On Europa, beneath the frozen ice, submarine factories converted their production lines from exploration vessels to stealth frigates capable of jumping through enemy sensor nets undetected. On Luna, in the deep craters of the far side, the great foundries awakened. These were the places where humanity had built the weapons that unified Earth. Terrible machines that had been mothballed after the last war. Now they were being reactivated, upgraded with 2 centuries of technological advancement. Commander Marcus Webb stood in the briefing room of the Mars Orbital Command, watching the holographic displays update in real time. Numbers climbed steadily as ships reported ready for deployment. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. "It's incredible," whispered his second officer, Commander Lisa Park. "I've never seen anything like this." Marcus nodded grimly. "Neither has anyone else. The last time humanity went to total war was against itself. We swore we'd never do it again. We promised we'd evolved beyond this. And now we remember that evolution doesn't mean weakness. It means we're more dangerous than we've ever been." The ships gathered in designated staging areas throughout human space. Ancient dreadnoughts that had been museum pieces were hauled out of retirement and fitted with modern weapons. Carriers designed for planetary defense found themselves equipped with long-range strike craft. Even civilian vessels were pressed into service, converted into troop transports, supply ships, and medical frigates. Every vessel bore a name. Some were traditional, drawn from Earth's military history: Yamato, Enterprise, Victory, Bismarck. Others were new, created specifically for this fleet. Horizon's Vengeance, Never Forget, Price of Mercy, Final Warning, and at the center of it all, the flagship that would lead the Armada into battle. The construction of this vessel had begun in secret 5 years ago, a project that existed only in classified files. It was a monster, 5 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shielded by technology that had never been tested in combat. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of this Leviathan, watching as the final systems came online. The ship's name had been classified until this moment, known only to the highest levels of command. Now it blazed across the hull in letters 50 meters tall, visible to every ship in the fleet. Reckoning. "All systems operational, Captain," reported her tactical officer. "We're ready," Yuki nodded slowly. She'd trained her entire career for command, had excelled in every simulation, every war game, but nothing had prepared her for this. For the weight of knowing that 500,000 ships would follow her into the darkness, that millions of lives depended on the decisions she would make. "Signal from Admiral Chen," her communications officer announced. "The fleet is assembled. All vessels report ready for deployment." Yuki took her seat in the command chair, feeling its weight settle around her. "Acknowledge. Prepare for fleet-wide transmission." Throughout human space, on every ship, in every barracks, in every command center, screens flickered to life. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared, still in the same uniform she'd worn 2 weeks ago when she'd first seen the footage of Horizon Prime. She looked tired, but her eyes burned with cold determination. "To all personnel of the Unified Earth Defense Force," she began, her voice carrying across light years. 2 weeks ago, the Krell sovereignty attacked Horizon Prime without warning, without mercy, and without justification. 8 million people, our people, were murdered. An entire world was erased. The Krell did this to send a message to prove that humanity could be terrorized into submission. She paused, and the camera pulled back to show the massive holographic display behind her, showing the assembled fleet. 500,000 points of light, each one a ship, each one a weapon aimed at the heart of the Krell sovereignty. "Today, we send our reply," Sarah continued. "We will not negotiate with those who commit genocide. We will not seek justice through councils and committees. We will deliver it ourselves." The Krell wanted to prove humans were weak. Instead, they will learn that we are the single most dangerous species in this galaxy, not because we seek war, but because when war is forced upon us, we prosecute it with absolute totality. The camera zoomed in on her face, and every person watching saw the same cold fire in her eyes. This fleet represents every human world, every nation, every creed and culture united in common purpose. We go now to show the galaxy what happens when you attack humanity. We go to make sure no one ever makes the Krell's mistake again. For Horizon Prime, for every man, woman, and child who died there, we are the reckoning. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed throughout the fleet, not a single voice was raised in celebration. This wasn't glory. This was duty. This was necessity. This was war. In the command center of the reckoning, Yuki received the final authorization codes from Earth. She entered them into her console and spoke the words that would change human history. "All ships, this is Reckoning Actual. Jump coordinates confirmed. Formation Omega 7. On my mark." 500,000 ships aligned themselves, their faster-than-light drives humming with barely contained power. Every captain, every crew member knew what came next. They were about to cross a line that humanity had never crossed before. Mark. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as 500,000 human warships vanished from normal space, leaving behind only the fading signatures of their jump drives. They were gone, racing through dimensions beyond human perception, carrying with them the fury of a species that had finally been pushed too far. Behind them, Earth and all her colonies watched and waited. Across the galaxy, other civilizations detected the massive gravitational disturbances and realized something unprecedented was happening. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions. Diplomats tried to establish contact with Earth, pleading for restraint, but humanity wasn't listening anymore. The reckoning had begun. The price of mercy. The Krell sovereignty had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were a warrior culture, proud and ancient, who believed that strength alone determined worthiness. Their empire spanned 27 star systems, and their fleets had never known true defeat. High Commander Throcknall stood in the war room of the Krell homeworld, studying tactical displays with satisfaction. The human colony had been eliminated perfectly, a demonstration of Krell superiority. He expected protests, perhaps economic sanctions, maybe even a small retaliatory strike that his fleets would easily repel. What he saw instead made his 3 hearts freeze in his chest. "Impossible," he whispered, his scaled hands gripping the edge of the display table. "This cannot be accurate." His second-in-command, Subcommander Verak, checked the readings again. "The sensors do not lie, High Commander. We are detecting massive spatial distortions across the entire border region. Whatever is coming, it is enormous." Throcknall had fought in dozens of campaigns. He understood fleet tactics, logistics, and the limitations of faster-than-light travel. No civilization could move more than a few hundred ships at once. The coordination required, the energy expenditure, the sheer mathematics of it made larger movements impossible. The humans were apparently unaware of these limitations. The first Krell border system was called Vecthor, a fortress world that had stood unconquered for centuries. Massive orbital defense platforms surrounded it, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. The system's defensive fleet consisted of 200 warships, more than enough to repel any reasonable attack. Admiral Kenji Yamamoto commanded the first wave of the human assault. His task force consisted of 50,000 ships, and he approached the problem with the methodical precision of a surgeon. "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept. reported his tactical officer. They're forming a defensive wall around the orbital platforms. Kenji nodded calmly. They're thinking conventionally. They expect us to engage their fleet, then assault the platforms. Instead, we'll demonstrate why conventional thinking is obsolete. Execute Protocol Hammer. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. The human fleet didn't engage in a traditional battle. Instead, 40,000 ships jumped to precise coordinates throughout the system simultaneously, creating a sphere of overwhelming firepower around every Krell position. The remaining 10,000 ships appeared directly above and below the planetary plane, positions the Krell defenses had never anticipated. The Krell fleet found itself surrounded, outgunned and completely outmaneuvered. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Not a single human ship was lost. Commander Verak watched the footage in horror. They didn't just defeat our forces. They rendered them irrelevant. This level of coordination, this tactical superiority, it should not be possible. But it was happening. System after system fell to the human advance. The pattern was always the same. Overwhelming numbers appeared from nowhere, executing maneuvers that defied conventional military doctrine. Krell commanders, trained in thousands of years of warfare tradition, found themselves completely unprepared for an enemy that rewrote the rules of engagement with every battle. Captain Yuki. Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Reckoning as the massive flagship jumped into the Krell system of Norkath. This was a major industrial world, producing warships and weapons for the entire sovereignty. The Krell had reinforced it heavily after the first border defeats, concentrating 3 full battle groups for its defense. Enemy fleet is hailing us, reported the communications officer. They're demanding we withdraw or face destruction. Yuki's expression didn't change. No response. Weapons target their command carriers. Full spread maximum yield. Show them what destruction actually looks like. The Reckoning's main weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Humanity had spent 2 centuries developing technology for peaceful purposes. But that same innovation applied to warfare created results that were terrifying in their efficiency. Particle beams that could slice through shields like paper, missiles that could track targets through dimensional jumps, railguns that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds, turning kinetic energy into city-killing impacts. The Krell's command carriers, massive vessels that had led fleets for generations, simply ceased to exist. One moment they were there, broadcasting defiant messages. The next they were expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The Krell fleet broke. For the first time in their proud history, their warriors fled before an enemy. But the humans had learned from the Krell's own tactics. They had studied how the sovereignty had attacked Horizon Prime, how they had ensured no survivors, no escape. Now humanity returned the lesson. Every fleeing Krell ship was tracked, targeted, and eliminated. The industrial facilities on Norkath were systematically destroyed. Not with the indiscriminate orbital bombardment the Krell had used on Horizon Prime, but with surgical precision that left the planet intact while eliminating every military asset. When the Reckoning finally departed, it left behind a message broadcast on all frequencies. Written in perfect Krell script, Horizon Prime remembers. High Commander Throcknall watched his empire crumble. In 3 weeks, humanity had destroyed or captured 40% of the Krell's military infrastructure. 60 star systems had been swept clean of Krell forces. Millions of warriors, the pride of the sovereignty, were dead or captured. We must negotiate, urged Sub-Commander Verak. Request ceasefire terms, offer reparations, anything to stop this. Throcknall's pride warred with his survival instinct. Finally, survival won. Contact the humans. Offer complete surrender of all forces involved in the Horizon Prime attack. Full reparations, whatever they demand. The message was sent on every available channel, marked with the highest priority. It reached the Reckoning within hours. Admiral Sarah Chen read the surrender offer in her private quarters. It was comprehensive, offering everything from war crime tribunals to financial compensation. In any conventional conflict, it would have been more than acceptable. But this wasn't a conventional conflict. Sarah deleted the message without responding and composed her own communication, which was transmitted to every Krell world simultaneously. The Krell sovereignty destroyed Horizon Prime to send a message. That message has been received. Our response is simple. You do not negotiate with humans after committing genocide. You face the consequences. We will accept only one form of surrender, unconditional and total. Every military vessel will be decommissioned. Every weapon system will be dismantled. Your empire will exist only because we choose to permit it. You will spend the next century remembering what happens when you murder our people. This is not negotiation. This is reality. The message was signed not by Sarah, but by all of humanity. Every world leader, every colony governor, every representative of human civilization had added their name. It was a united front that allowed no room for misunderstanding. The Krell had 1 week to comply. They didn't take it. Instead, High Commander Throcknall made the final fatal mistake of the war. He gathered every remaining Krell warship, over 3,000 vessels, and staged them at the Sovereignty's homeworld. It was a desperate gamble, a last stand that would either break the human advance or end in glorious defeat. The Krell believed that even humans would hesitate before attacking a homeworld defended by such a force. They believed wrong. Commander Marcus Webb led the assault on the Krell home system. His force consisted of 150,000 ships, a fleet larger than anything the galaxy had ever witnessed in one location. The gravitational distortions from their arrival actually affected the orbit of the Krell homeworld's outer moons. "This is Commander Webb to all Krell forces," Marcus transmitted. "You have 30 minutes to evacuate all civilian populations to designated safe zones. After that time, any vessel in orbit will be considered a military target. This is your only warning." The Krell fleet didn't move. Their commanders, bound by honor and pride, refused to abandon their positions. They would fight to the last ship, the last warrior, the last breath. Marcus had expected this. "All ships maintain blockade formation. Do not fire unless fired upon. We will give them their 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes were the longest of Marcus Webb's life. He watched the Krell fleet, saw their weapons charging, knew that at any moment they might decide to launch a desperate attack. Part of him hoped they would stand down. That reason would prevail. But he knew better. The Krell were warriors. They would choose death over surrender. When the 30 minutes expired, Marcus gave the order he'd been dreading. "All ships weapons free. Eliminate all military targets. Protect civilian areas at all costs." What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The human fleet's superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and perfect coordination reduced the Krell's last stand to a slaughter. The proud warriors fought bravely, but bravery meant nothing against the fury they had unleashed. Within 4 hours, the Krell Sovereignty's military ceased to exist as a functional force. The orbital space around their homeworld was filled with debris, the shattered remains of 3,000 warships. But the planet itself remained intact, its cities undamaged, its people alive. This was the difference between humanity's justice and the Krell's genocide. Humans had the power to destroy the Krell homeworld as thoroughly as Horizon Prime had been destroyed. They chose not to. High Commander Throcknall was brought aboard the Reckoning in chains. He had been pulled from the wreckage of his command ship, one of the few senior Krell officers to survive. Captain Yuki Tanaka met him in the holding area, studying the defeated warrior with cold eyes. "Why?" Throcknall asked, his voice broken. "You had the power to erase our world. Why did you spare us?" Yuki considered the question carefully. "Because we are not you. We do not exterminate populations to make political statements. We do not murder civilians to prove our strength. What you saw as weakness was actually restraint. Now you understand the difference." "You have destroyed us completely," Throcknall said bitterly. "Our empire, our military, our pride, all gone. Death would have been more merciful." "Perhaps," Yuki agreed. "But death would have been easier for you. This way you and your people will live with the knowledge of what your leaders' choices cost. Every day you will remember that you started a war you couldn't win, that you murdered millions for no reason, and that humanity showed you more mercy than you showed us." She turned to leave, then paused. "Your civilization will be allowed to rebuild. Your people will not be enslaved or exterminated, but you will do so knowing that humanity could erase you at any moment and chooses not to. Perhaps that will teach you something about true strength." The war ended not with a treaty, but with a declaration. The Krell sovereignty was dissolved. Its territory was placed under Galactic Council supervision until a new government could be established. Every Krell military officer involved in the Horizon Prime massacre was tried and convicted by an international tribunal. The reparations demanded were steep but not impossible, designed to remind the Krell of their mistakes without destroying their economy. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the human fleets vanished. 500,000 warships jumped back to human space in a single coordinated movement. They didn't parade through friendly systems. They didn't celebrate their victory. They simply went home. Admiral Sarah Chen stood once more in the command center on Earth, watching as the last ships reported successful return. Secretary General Okonkwo joined her, his face showing relief mixed with concern. "The galaxy is calling us monsters," he said quietly. "They say we went too far, that we could have stopped after the first few victories." Sarah shook her head. "They're wrong. If we had stopped, it would have sent the message that humans can be intimidated, that sufficient force can make us back down. Now every species knows the truth. Attack our civilians, destroy our worlds, and we will end you. Not through diplomacy, not through sanctions, but through overwhelming military force applied without hesitation or mercy." And the cost? Minimal human casualties, Krell military eliminated. Civilian populations largely intact. "We accomplished our objectives with precision." Sarah pulled up a final display. "But the real cost isn't measured in ships or lives. It's measured in what we revealed about ourselves. For 2 centuries, we presented humanity as peaceful explorers, as diplomatic traders. Now the galaxy knows we're also the most dangerous warriors they've ever encountered." Okonkwo sighed. "Do you think it was worth it?" Sarah thought of Horizon Prime, of 8 million people who never got to say goodbye, of children who died in their sleep as orbital bombardment turned their world to glass. "Every single ship," she said firmly. "Every single battle. Yes, it was worth it." 3 months after the war ended, a memorial was constructed in orbit around the ruins of Horizon Prime. It was a massive structure, visible from light years away, built from the melted hull plating of Krell warships. Engraved on its surface were 8 million names, every person who had died in the attack. But the memorial had another purpose. Embedded in its structure were sensor arrays, communication relays, and weapon platforms. It stood as both a tribute to the dead and a warning to the living. Anyone approaching Horizon Prime would see it, would read those names, and would understand the price of attacking humanity. Captain Yuki Tanaka attended the dedication ceremony aboard the Reckoning, which had been assigned permanent patrol duties in the sector. She watched as the memorial's eternal flame was lit, a fusion reaction that would burn for 10,000 years. "Do you think they'll remember?" asked her first officer. "The Krell, the other species, do you think they'll remember what happened here?" Yuki looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy filled with countless civilizations, some friendly, some hostile, many still unknown. "They'll remember, and if they forget, if some other species decides to test humanity's resolve, we'll be ready to remind them." The Reckoning's engines flared to life, beginning its patrol route. Across human space, the massive fleet that had been assembled was being carefully maintained and upgraded. The ships weren't mothballed this time. They remained active, ready, a permanent reminder that humanity had learned its lesson. Peace was preferable. Diplomacy was always the first choice. But if forced to war, humanity would prosecute it with a totality that terrified the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chen transmitted one final message. Not to the Krell, not to the Galactic Council, but to all of humanity, broadcast on every human world. "We did not seek this war. We did not want to become what we became. But when 8 million of our people were murdered, we had no choice. Today we honor their memory not with words, but with action. We have shown the galaxy that humanity will defend itself with absolute determination. We have proven that we are not victims, not prey, not targets. We are survivors. We are warriors when we must be. We are the species that responds to genocide with justice, to attack with overwhelming force, to hate with cold, calculated fury. Remember Horizon Prime, remember what we did to avenge them, and pray we never have to do it again." The message ended. Throughout human space, people went back to their lives, to building, exploring, and dreaming. But they did so knowing that somewhere in the darkness 500,000 warships stood ready. Knowing that humanity had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The galaxy had learned a lesson written in fire and steel. Humanity could be peaceful, diplomatic, and kind. But push them too far, murder their people, destroy their worlds, and they would unleash a reckoning that would shake the stars themselves. The Krell sovereignty had learned this lesson at the cost of their empire. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy would be wise enough to remember it. In the ruins of what had been Horizon Prime, the memorial's eternal flame burned bright against the darkness, a promise and a warning that would endure long after every ship had turned to dust, long after the last veteran of the war had died. Humanity had struck back. The galaxy would never forget.